All right, my name's Carter Williams. I'm running for Circuit Judge Division Two, which will this election will be designated as the 26th Judicial Circuit because of realignment of the circuits last year. Our 22nd has been renumbered, redesignated to the 26th. So I'm currently Circuit Judge in the 22nd Circuit, which is Hampshire, Hardy, Pendleton. The only thing that will change is our number. So, and there's two judges. The other judge, chief judge currently is Judge Charlie Carl. So I've been currently sitting circuit judge in this circuit since January of 2017. My wife Tana and my two daughters Olivia and Kami Grace, we live in Oldfields, which is 6 miles north of Moorfield. So it's between Moorfield and Romney. So been married about 20 years. My daughters are 19 and 17. And that's my most important role is husband and father. Everything else hopefully comes second. Isn't always that way. This job has a way of demanding a lot of time and energy. So have to make sure I divide that properly. By the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we have many pets, which have a very high standing in our household. So a lot of cats and dogs, and one rabbit. I graduated law school in 1991. I worked for one of the largest law firms in the state, Bowles Rice, McDavid, Graff and Love, for 2 years out of law school. I worked in Martinsburg for 2 years. That was in the litigation department for that firm, which was a very good beginning for me. Out of law school, you don't really know a lot about the practical side of being a lawyer, but that exposed me to a lot of professional people that I still admire and still stay in touch with. I came back home after 2 years. I took a job here in this county as assistant prosecuting attorney. Steve Moreland was the prosecutor at that time. And I was in that job about 3 years. The funnest job probably I ever had. Got to know the local bar here, for example, Judge Carl, and I have been friends since the early 90s, since I was here, which is really, it's nice to have not only a colleague that you know, but that is a trusted friend. So after that, I worked for about 3.5 years for a private law firm in Petersburg, Gary and Gary, for Jay and Buck Gary. It was a private general practice. They did everything: real estate litigation, appointed cases, criminal, etc., some civil litigation. So that was very good experience. So just in my first, 7 or 8 years, I got not only a big law firm, one of the biggest in the state, to a really small 3-person law firm, general practice. And when I was a prosecutor here, I think that's what gave me a taste for the public service. So after probably 3.5 years at Gary and Gary, I was offered a job with the state attorney general. And lo and behold, I was there almost 20 years. So got to meet so many interesting people, work with so many people over the state. I was originally assigned to 15 counties in the eastern part of the state. I was assigned to the Bureau for Children and Families of the Department of Health and Human Resources at that time. It's changed its name now. I was embedded with the DHHR staff, but I worked for the Attorney General. So I represented in some fashion that agency for 18 years before I ran for judge in 2016. So primarily represented the agency that promotes and represents and advocates for children, foster care children, juveniles, youth in custody, adults, elderly, mentally impaired, intellectually disabled. So a lot of vulnerable people, you would say, in our society. And it was very satisfying work over those years. And then Judge Parsons retired, and the seat became open in 2016. So I ran, and I've been judge since, almost 7.5 years. My community is mainly through my church. Currently attend Duffy Memorial Church in Moorfield. My daughters are very active in the youth group. My wife and I are. We were also volunteers in the Awana program, which is a children's program that's kind of like Sunday school through the week. And so most of my community projects are through that context. I am a member of Bean Settlement Ruritan. Grew up as a farm kid, glad for that. My mom, I wish she was still around because I'd like to thank her for making us work hard as kids, because that's a skill that we so need. And I just really am glad that she taught us. I have 3 siblings, so we were farm kids. So the Ruritan is made up of a lot of farm people. And so they do a lot of community work. So that's primarily my community experience. When you come out of law school, you really, and this might be different at some law schools, especially now, but when I came out 30 some years ago, the practical piece of the practice of law wasn't really that greatly emphasized. So what you do day to day as an attorney, you have to learn. And you can only learn it by experiencing it and doing it. Well, it's even more so when you become an elected official like a judge or magistrate, family judge, whatever it is. There is a couple-day training that they go over the fundamentals and hit the high spots of what you're going to be doing. But honestly, there's no way to prepare yourself for what you're going to be in for until you actually start doing it. And fortunately for me, I got to observe in the months before I took office, I got to observe Judge Carl and Judge Parsons, who was then the other judge here. And that was a huge benefit. They were very gracious, let me sit in to observe them. So that helped. The training helped that the Supreme Court provides. But so I remember the first day that I took the bench, the first case, I felt extremely exposed. Like, wow, oh boy, you're here by yourself now. There are things that you just have to experience and learn by doing. And you don't realize that when you're a judge, even if you're not the chief judge, and Judge Carl's a chief judge and a wonderful chief judge, and he has taught me more about being a circuit judge than I could ever hope to pass on. So that's been a huge benefit. But you don't realize the things that you have to juggle administratively as a manager in charge of a lot of personnel that work for the court, all the programs and the stakeholders in the court system. I mean, just to get to know them and to hopefully provide access to them, the attorneys, the bailiffs, the court security, the law enforcement, probation, all the agencies that come before the court, not to mention all the parties. It's a lot to digest in a short amount of time when you start. And I think there are some things you just have time and experience hopefully prepares you. And I can say now, looking back 7.5 years, there's things I do differently now that I've learned that are a better process. forms that we've used, we revised them quite often. Our circuit is very uniformly, um, we like to do things consistently, so there's continuity in our process, so that if Judge Carl misses a day, he's sick and I have to sit in for him, or vice versa, we're probably going to conduct our proceedings very similar way. I think that the expectations for the bar and the parties, that's a good thing, because they know hopefully what to expect in general about the process. So having done that for almost 7.5 years, it there's no price or premium you can put on for doing it for that long. So for me, I hope to continue serving another term. I've been honored to do it. I've met and been able to work with some incredible colleagues that I just can't imagine not knowing or working with, who've really made it fulfilling for me. And there are times when you get things wrong, but it's not for lack of effort. And that's what we always, Judge Carl and I say that to each other all the time. We're not perfect. If we get something wrong, we hope it's not because we didn't put the effort in it to get it right. My record on appeal would be something measurable. I think I've had probably 60 or more cases appealed, and my affirm rate by the Supreme Court's probably well in the upper 90%. I've never had a case completely reversed, only partially, and only a couple of those out of 60 cases or more. So that's an empirical measure or measurement, hopefully, that gives you some thought that you're hopefully doing things right. Sometimes your greatest successes and opportunities and productive process comes out of your failure or your mistakes. And I think that's, again, comes with time and experience. So I think that probably is, the most striking thing I could say about why I would be prepared to go. I think my 2 or 3 primary goals would be what I've already been involved in and started. Number one is to be as accessible as a judicial officer to all the stakeholders about our process, not obviously about specific cases, but to be accessible and to be always open to new ideas about how we can better be more productive, more proficient, more efficient, continue to try to get things right in cases. And, criminal cases, child abuse and neglect cases, juvenile cases, they tend to have a repetitive type of procedure or process, or even the facts in a lot of those are the same. Civil cases are quite a challenge because there are so many different causes of action, claims, defenses. So it's hard for a circuit judge to get really proficient in any of those because there's so many of them. So when you have a case, for example, a wrongful death case, or let's say a defamation case, or a negligence case, you really have to make yourself study up on that. You try to make a sort of a bank of knowledge and forms and information in case law and statutes that apply to that, so that you can draw on those when you need it. But so another goal would be to try to get more proficient in the areas of civil law that come before the court, because they're a challenge. And also, I hope at some point we would be able to have, and it's not up to us, it's depending on federal funding, a family treatment court, which would be a court that would be for parents who are having challenges raising their children to provide safety for them. And it's more of an informal process, sort of like the drug court. but it's very treatment oriented. It's accountability based, it's peer based, obviously overseen by the court. There's been probably 8 or 10 across the state that have done very well with really positive results for the most part. So we have been in line to have one of those. I'm a proponent of those, and I hope that if I'm fortunate enough to be elected for another term, that we are able to put one of those in place. And just to try to get, just get better, more efficient. These are people's lives and people's finances and people's children and property. And, the hope is that you get better in making decisions and rulings that are fair and correct. So that's obviously the ultimate goal. I think you have to be. Not only are you or can you be, I think you have to be. I am currently the chair of the West Virginia Supreme Court Improvement Program Oversight Board. And our goal is to promote better outcomes for children that find themselves in the court system. And almost weekly, certainly monthly, we have quarterly meetings, but our goal is to adopt processes, stakeholders, and resources to help make change for those kids. West Virginia has, for example, 7,000 kids that are in foster care. Per capita, we lead the United States in that, which is not a good statistic. It's not exactly fair because some of our juvenile population, our delinquency population, they get placed in facilities, so that is also added to our 7,000 in foster care. So we're a little bit different from other states. So our number's probably not quite that high. But one thing that we've done over the last 3 or 4 years, even though we lead the nation in that statistic, we have become one of the top 3 states in when children do come out of the home. We're one of the top 3 states that allow those children to be adopted by relatives, like grandparents, aunts and uncles, older siblings. So that is a change that we've made in the last, just since I've been judge. I mean, we came from nowhere. We've had legislation that prefers grandparents and relatives for placement. Nothing against foster care. I'm glad we have foster parents. God bless them. And we need more. But we've really focused our change on relative placement, because it matters for children to stay in their family group if they can, to stay in their community, and to stay in hopefully their school district. If we can keep them in that place of family, community, school, the statistics are that their outcomes are hugely better. So, and when they're in foster homes, I'm not saying that's not as good, but the statistics are we've become much better doing that in the top couple of states in the country. So that's a project that we've not only pushed for change, we've actually, through legislation and through adopting certain processes and policy, have been able to accomplish. That's just one. So I think it's absolutely necessary that you, to the extent you can, I mean, we're not legislators, so we you can promote some legislation, but we do it in such a way as it's sanctioned by the court. I mean, we stay under the auspices of the Supreme Court of our state. So that's been a huge honor for me to chair that since 2019. And I plan to stay on it if elected, because I feel like we still have a lot of work to do.